All right. Welcome back to another episode of Path of Purpose. Today I have my guest, Valerie Reichman. Is that how I'm pronouncing it?
That's correct.
Okay, Valerie Reichman. Valerie, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank
All,
you.
all right. Let's just get started. So, what is a psycho-spiritual therapist for the audience, or for me too?
That's a good question. Well, I would say that a psychospiritual therapist is a therapist that combines spirituality and psychology. And it doesn't have to be something separate, but we can merge the two together without it being weird, actually.
Mm,
So, yeah.
huh. Where did that like term first get coined?
Oh, I am not sure. I believe it could be coined to Jung,
Okay.
who is considered to be a psychospiritual therapist or psychologist or even a psychiatrist,
Yeah.
um, because I think Jung could be seen as one of the first psychologists who actually wasn't afraid to
Mm,
merge these two together um, without, he just wasn't afraid to merge these two together
huh.
and just went completely. He went for it. He went for the transpersonal. He went for the spiritual,
Yeah.
and I think it was coined probably together with Jung.
Mm. Why do you think people were afraid to go there before?
Hmm. I believe that science was the new god
Mm,
um, in um, in that period of time.
yeah.
And I believe that science was considered to be the ultimate truth, you know,
Mm, yeah.
and if you derived from it, or if you, um, you know, were saying things that were not specifically scientific, couldn't be scientifically proven, for example, then it was considered to be um, not
Yeah.
interesting or put
Mm,
aside or even considered to be BS.
yeah.
It's
Wow.
not scientifically proven.
So like, yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead. Go,
no,
you go. I was just gonna say it sounds like, yeah, like a fear of being like discredited for not seeming like valid.
exactly. And this is why I admire Jung so much, because Jung, at a certain point, he said, I'm going to leave university
Mm,
and I'm going to go my own way, even though he was a really important professor and had immense knowledge and study and studied a lot and had written a lot of things. But at a certain point, he understood the period he was living in, and he had the courage to say,
mm,
"Okay, I'm just gonna leave myself being a professor, and I'm gonna, um, um, you know, um, dive. I'm gonna
mm,
dive into what I'm interested in, which
yeah.
is also psychology, but it touches also more transpersonal aspects of
Huh.
life as well. Yeah,
Yeah. Because it seems like too, it's like how can like you go to therapy and like fully receive the benefits of therapy without like talking about your relationship to God if that's something that you believe in, right?
absolutely. Your relationship with God, your relationship with nature, um, your beliefs,
Yeah.
your feelings, the interactions that you're having. All this is not only determined by psychology,
Yeah.
but there is this um, mysterious aspect that needs to be taken into consideration. you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm happy. I do feel that we're getting into an era, and I'm really careful when I'm saying that I really start to feel that we're living in an era where this is starting to be possible. You
Mm,
can go to a therapist today,
yeah.
and you can start and talk about um, things that are considered to be maybe less scientific and
Yeah.
more spiritual, something that wasn't even, I mean, we weren't even considering it before. So
Mm,
there is some light there. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So in terms of like your work as a therapist, was merging the psychology and the spiritual aspects, was that something that was always interesting to you in your work as a therapist?
It's funny that you're saying that, because before that, or that you're asking that, before I went to study transpersonal psychology, I didn't even knew about the term transpersonal psychology, for example, or not very much psychospiritual approach or therapy. But I suddenly understood that I was actually applying transpersonal
Mm,
psychology, or applying already um, psychospiritual approaches in my therapy room without me knowing about it, without
mm,
me really understanding it. So it is something that I knew was there, but I think I didn't have the words to
yeah.
understand it yet, or to express it yet, if that makes sense.
Like the framework to conceptualize, like
Exactly.
putting it into practice.
Exactly. I am I am passionate about dream work and about psychodrama, and this is something that I've been applying for several years. But I really understood that these were
Mm,
transpersonal approaches only once I've, deepened myself more into these transpersonal psychology and approaches.
wow.
So, yes,
So it sounds like this is something that you've kind of like always been doing, but once you started to learn more about like transpersonal psychology, it became more like, I guess, like official as this is psychospiritual therapy now.
exactly, exactly. It gave me exactly how you said it. It conceptualized it. It made me understand, like, I've been doing that for quite some times, and so I've been doing it for quite some time, and it has a term, and it has a whole framework behind
Mm,
it,
yeah.
and that made it even more interesting to me to maybe dive into other transpersonal or psychospiritual approaches.
Mm. So after initially learning about uh, transpersonal approaches or psychospiritual approaches, like what kind of like what was like the next path for you of like getting into this, I guess at a deeper intellectual level per se?
Um,
I could rephrase that too if I,
yeah, please do.
so I would say like in terms of after you first started learning about this like conceptually, what was the next area of interest for you to like further your knowledge?
I'm not sure if it was if we can talk about my next what did you say, next
In terms of like furthering your knowledge in the within like the craft or field.
no, I just think I just deepened myself into into the domain that I was already in. I could
Ooh.
deepen myself into it more. It was more like going I think I can say that it was more like diving more deeper into it, maybe instead of enlarging it. But I'm not sure, because I also it's not or and or, it's and and. But it did make me realize, for instance, how psychodrama, for example, you are in a very special space. When I'm a psychodrama therapist, I don't know if people know exactly what we're doing during psychodrama, but psychodrama, for example, you work with groups, and people are going to to embody, for example, other people, or even objects, or even animals, um, um, and things are going to, all this is happening on stage. But what I'm trying to say is, if I'm going to invite my dead grandfather on stage, and you're going to play my dead grandfather, for example, in order for me to have some kind of closure and to have this final talk with him, for example, this is what's called being in a potential space. You are in a space that is actually between the objective reality and the subjective reality. You know that you're not really talking to your dead grandfather, but it gives you an opportunity to be in that space where a lot of healing can happen, if that makes sense. This is what is also called to go beyond your ego. You are having. I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah.
losing myself here as well, but
No, you're good.
um, yeah.
So this that's super fascinating, and it sounds like too that allows you to like develop a like not only like a deeper level of like empathy in the situation, but also to like experience it and to like experience something new um in a way where you may not ordinarily be able to experience that feeling or
Exactly,
emotion.
exactly. You're
Yeah, go ahead.
no Yeah, you are being put in the shoes of somebody else. Moreno said, and he's the inventor of psychodrama, and he said that if I could, it's 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 actually a pretty violent phrase, but he said, if I could, tear your eyes out and put them into mine, and I will tear, and you will tear my eyes out and put them into yours, then I will look at the world from your point of view, and you would be able to look at the world from my point of view, which is actually what psychodrama is all about.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is also a great opportunity to start talking about some of your research that you've been doing. And is so in specifically within like the building piece in the Middle East in that project, is that in that like was the specific method, was that using that sort of similar like psychodrama to facilitate?
This was one approach that was used, but in terms of my research, so I researched transpersonal approaches to peace building between Israelis and Palestinians. So what happened is that I interviewed people who participated and or facilitated peace building events in which Israelis and Palestinians are present, and in which transpersonal approaches are being applied. Yeah.
So so what like for the listeners who are coming and listening and hearing this for the first time, like what were like the key findings from that research?
So the most interesting finding, and it's is that we realized, or I realized whilst doing my research, that every approach, whether it's psychodrama, whether it's meditation, whether it's expressive arts, whether it's, dancing and movement therapy, all these different kind of transpersonal approaches, well, there was one thing in common there. And the thing in common that was there implicitly or explicitly, it was that in the end, the facilitators pushed the participants to express their own narrative,
Mm.
which is, you know, it is something that is unfortunately not applied enough. And if it was applied, I mean, we wouldn't be in the situation that we are in today in the Middle
Yeah.
East. But, people are very well aware of their own narrative, but are they aware that there is another narrative?
Mm.
That, I mean, I may have my own narrative, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that I have the ultimate truth here. And
Mm.
you may have another narrative, and
Wow.
that doesn't mean that you have the ultimate truth. But my narrative, me being able to acknowledge that you have a narrative, doesn't mean that I am dismissing my own narrative.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that. And people tend to believe that, whoa, if I acknowledge another narrative than my own, it's going to mean that I'm dismissing my own. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Wow.
Um,
That's profound.
it was very profound because I didn't only interview these people, but I was also there in 3 transpersonal peace building approaches between Israelis and Palestinians. And at a certain point, I did an amazing exercise, and it was during a systemic constellation. And during that exercise, I was talking to a man from Gaza, and we were doing the exercise together. And during that exercise, we were talking about the conflict, and we had to express our emotions about the conflict. However, and that's the twist, the very interesting twist, I had to pretend psychodrama. I had to pretend that I was a man from Gaza, and he had to pretend that he was a Jewish Israeli from Israel. So we were talking about the conflict, but I had to put myself in his shoes, and he had to put himself in my shoes. And we were having this conversation being the other, simply the other. It was very profound. It was very, um, I don't think I even have the right words to describe what happened there, because it was beautiful, actually. It was beautiful. See, I don't have the words. It was very profound and emotionally loaded. It was very intense, very intense. Yeah.
Yeah. And more than it also, as you're describing this sounds like this is like really, we're reaching like the limits of science almost by
Oh,
like within these methods.
absolutely. And I think it's phenomenologically based. I mean, it's about my experience. It's about your experience. It's about what you're going through, what I'm
Yeah.
going through. And this might be very subjective, but it's there, and we're in a sharing space, and we are interacting, and we are sharing so many profound things, and we don't care about ultimate truths.
Yeah.
We care about this is what happened to me,
Mm.
and this is what happened to you. And it's not because something terrible happened to me, and because you are considered to be, on the other side, or my enemy, or whatever, that something terrible didn't happen to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is one of the most difficult things that I realize in Israeli society, for example, that
Yeah.
I realized that's going on. I mean, it's very, very difficult to acknowledge the other's narrative. And I'm going to say even what Jung said about to hold the tension between both narratives.
Yeah.
That's what's difficult. That's what's
Mm.
difficult. It's to be able to say, hey, there is my story, which is difficult. There
Yeah.
is your story, which is difficult, and we are not putting our misery or our stories on a scale. This is not what we're doing. This is not the goal,
Yeah.
you know? The
Wow.
goal is to accept your story, but please accept mine as well.
Wow. Yeah. That's wow, that's so fascinating. How do, because it seems like, look, like this is like clearly in uh like a complicated issue, and one that is like very oftentimes like very close to somebody's identity and their spiritual identity as well. So how can we how can we get to a point where more people are willing to have this type of conversation? Because it seems like once you're there, like that's almost the hard part, is like getting someone there. Is Would you
Yes.
say that's true?
Yes, and at the same time, I want to say that it's such an important question that you're asking, because let's not forget that people that are going to these events, to these
Yeah.
peace building events, are already people who, in my opinion, are ready to compromise, or are ready to have interactions, or are ready to, talk about the very, very difficult things that, needs to
Yeah.
be talked about. Um, so, to come back to your question, how I think the first thing that pops into my mind is media is not showing enough. The media is not showing enough that these events do happen, that this
Yeah.
is out there, that
Mm,
this exists, that people, that, if I am going to say today out loud, hey, world,
yeah.
do you know that Israelis and Palestinians come together, share together, hug each other, cry together? They wouldn't even believe me. People
Yeah.
wouldn't even believe me that something like that exists, and it
Mm,
does exist, but it's not out there enough.
yeah.
It's not portrayed enough, and let's be very, very honest. It should exist much more. It should be much more out there,
Yeah.
which it unfortunately doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, or isn't, which isn't. Yeah.
Mm, yeah. And yeah, I mean, I'm in the US here, and you turn on the news, and I've never seen anything that has to do, nothing highlighting anything positive ever.
No, 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 and this is exactly what I'm trying to what I tried to convey also through my research, and it's like, let alone the results. I mean, the results are a little drop of hope, of
Yeah.
course, but you know, just saying to people out there, that we sit together and we talk to each other, and there's not only the horrors that you see on the news. It is not
Yeah.
true at all, and that makes me sad, because it's a false. There is also some kind of false narrative out there that this is all about hate and conflict and destruction. It's there as well. I'm not gonna pretend it isn't,
Yeah.
but there's so much more out there that people just don't know.
Wow. So then, like on an individual level, what could what can we do in order to like start that conversation?
Hmm. You mean start that conversation, meaning having more events like that? In that optic, you're asking it, or have the
Or yeah,
conversation?
or just like with somebody who feels very strongly about the topic and maybe isn't open to seeing the other side.
Hmm. It's $1 million question. I mean, again, what I retrieved the most from that research is that we fear the other so much, and the other fears us so much. We have a common fear towards each other, but we don't even know each other. We
Yeah.
don't know each other. I mean, I don't, prior to this research, I had never met a Palestinian before, ever in my life. I live in Israel,
Yeah.
okay? So I would say we need we need to get to know each other
Mm,
first. Don't ask me how. I
yeah.
mean, this is, but we need to get to know each other. But the fear is tremendous, and this is to go back to my research. Another thing um, that I understood that happened in these transpersonal peace building events is that the first thing that the facilitators did in order for us to be even able to interact with one another
Yeah.
is to lower the fear, is to
Mm,
lower the fear. This was done through exercises in really small groups, getting to know one another, having breakfast together. There was even one 3-day event where they explicitly put Palestinians and Israelis in the same room. So they slept together in the same room. Imagine,
yeah.
I mean, this is I mean, I saw, you're seeing the other in his pajamas, and you're eating with him, and you're brushing your teeth with him,
Yeah.
and these are all little, sounds like stupid details, but this humanizes the other. We
Yeah.
forgot how to humanize the other,
Wow.
because we think that the other one is like sort of a monster, and the other one thinks that I am so sort of a monster. But then when you see that I am also a mom, and I also put my pajama, and I also brush my teeth, and I
Yeah.
also have breakfast with you, and sometimes I call my children to tell them good night while I'm not there for,
Yeah.
it humanizes the other, and there is there is some kind of more easygoing interaction that takes place, but it takes time. You need a few hours, a few days, even a few weeks to
Yeah.
really get into humanizing the other again, because we
Wow.
forgot how to do that. We really forgot how to do that. Yeah.
Wow. At like what like scale is this happening at? Is there like how how does somebody get involved in something like this? If someone like wants to do this, like how can they get involved?
You mean to get involved in peace building events?
Yeah.
Um, there are a lot of associations. You can, I don't know how you say it in good English, subscribe yourself to, affiliate. That's the
Okay.
good word, to affiliate yourself to, right?
Yeah.
But then again, you have to be very open minded if you are going to affiliate yourself into these associations, because um, even, you already have to have some sort of, I don't know, inner work, inner hope, um, a sort of an um, activism personality, or some sort of drive to want to go to something better.
Yeah.
And if you do, you're going, for yourself, you're going to, explore what kind of associations are out there, and then you're going to maybe affiliate yourself to these sorry, associations. And a lot of these associations, they organize um, you know um, psychodrama groups, and they go to a meeting with another associations where you can meet other Israelis and
Yeah.
Palestinians, and there are talks, and there, but it's, the first step needs to come, I believe so, from your own power and admission that something needs to change,
Yeah. Mm,
if that makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So are like at these like for the last one that you went to, was there the same amount of like Palestinians as there were Israelis? Or like what's like the distribution from your
Oh, that's a
experience
good
like?
question. It depended which event, but I have to say, overall, there was like a 50-50
Yeah.
rate. I think so. Overall, there was a 50% rate, taking into consideration that from the West Bank, there were more people able to come. From Gaza. It was much more, much more complicated.
Yeah.
There was also Zoom was also is not was but is also an incredible tool today,
Yeah.
where you can have interactions also with people from around the world. So no, I would say a 50-50 rate. Actually, I
Yeah.
was even surprised and positively surprised that there were
Huh.
so many people. Yeah.
Did you find that there was a like a big difference in being able to like build rapport and to get to know somebody if you're like in person with someone versus like doing one of these on Zoom?
For sure. For sure. Take into consideration that through Zoom, it was a 3-hour workshop. It was completely transformative. It was one
Yeah.
of the best. I mean, it was a workshop about, remember, I explained to you just before about me being in the shoes of the other. So we
Yeah.
did that through Zoom. But of course, when you are 3 days in a remote place where you um, even sleep with a Palestinian or a Palestinian with an Israeli in the same room, and you have moments where you can have conversations together without it being, um, in parallel of the organized activities. Of course, the impact is stronger and more profound, and there is this intimacy that is building up that is really beautiful to see, because it comes gradually, and in the
Yeah.
beginning the fear is still overwhelming, but after a few hours, a few days, the fear is there is this veil of fear that you are able to take it off,
Yeah.
and so suddenly you are even some people keep even in contact with the other one. this
Wow.
this person from Gaza that I had this profound um, exercise with him.
Yeah.
We are still in contact with each other.
Mm.
We write each other messages.
Yeah.
So uh, it's very complicated and very complex.
Yeah.
Certainly post 7 October, October 7th, it's very, very complex and intense and difficult. But here and there, we still send each other messages. So
Wow.
yeah,
That'd
yeah,
be a really good movie.
absolutely, yeah,
So
yeah.
did you get involved with peace building while doing your master's program, or was this something you were
Yes.
involved in before?
No, I wasn't involved at all in peace
Okay.
building, to tell you the truth. This was, you know, thanks to my master's, and I decided to go on that path. Um, and it has been, let alone put aside the academic work that I did, on a personal level, it has been absolutely transformative for
Mm.
me as a person. Um,
The
uh,
peace building, you're saying, or the academic program?
no, the academic program as well, but I'm
Okay.
talking about yes, the research, being
Okay.
able
Ah.
um, to do that research
Yeah.
was for me completely transformative. I mean, I didn't expect for a second that I was going to be able to myself, uh, as a participant, be
Yeah.
at those peace building events. And I met so many people, and I had the opportunity, and I am I consider it such privilege to
Yeah.
have been able to sit down with Palestinians and to have these beautiful conversations, and to let them speak about their pain, and to
Yeah.
me speak about my pain, and to be able to do that in a safe space
Mm.
without pointing my finger at the
Yeah.
other person, and without the other person pointing their finger towards me, but just having this real, raw, intense conversation was for me incredibly transformative. It
Wow.
really was amazing, amazing.
Wow.
Yeah,
That sounds, yeah, that sounds really profound, and almost like it's like almost like the most challenging conversation to have between like two people. I can't think of like a more challenging one.
yeah,
And like during the past 2 years, I've been working with hospice patients, like visiting with them one on one, and just like sitting and talking with them. And I feel like even like those conversations at times can be certainly challenging and emotionally charged, but at the same time, it's not it's not like as much there's not as much hostility, because at
right,
most it's like maybe one person's worked up, you know? But
sure.
like when two people are so emotionally invested, it's like that's a real challenge to be able to have, and to like sit down and to be able to really like hear each other, and to to really like understand each other and meet behind everything that's going on.
Absolutely. And, don't get me wrong. Um, there were moments that were heated.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes it was the intensity, or the emotions ran so high that sometimes some people had to get up and go out of the room to, you know, to
Yeah.
to to um, to unwind, or it's not always it's not always as I just explained it to you, that beautiful and we are understanding. And no, we're still talking about ingrained narratives
Yeah.
that we are not dismissing, but suddenly having our narrative suddenly needs to be open to has to open new doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, or
Mm.
doesn't have to, but there is this opportunity. It's not easy, because I'm talking to you about it, and I want to be very, very clear and very, very honest that even me, after having done that research, etc., it is still difficult for me today to hold the tension between these opposing narratives.
Yeah.
It is still difficult. It is sometimes I am more able to do it. Sometimes I clinch very, very hard to my own narrative,
Yeah.
and it's like a dance, and it's difficult, and it comes with tears, and it comes with hard work, and it comes with um, it's very challenging. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine. It's so close to like it's so close to who you are, it seems, you know? To
yeah,
and like to be able to like sit and have that conversation and like sit in the pocket while that's happening,
yeah.
and to like to almost be like to almost to feel like you have the responsibility to like not identify with that role while you're doing that is like that's so hard. Like how could you that's like being a mediator, and like also at the same time like one side of it's like your family.
Right. But you said it. You pinpointed it exactly. You said it's very close to who you are, and it's really that. It's why is it so difficult? Because the narrative has become part of your identity.
Yeah.
That's why it's so hard. And you have the impression that if you give in to the narrative of the other, that you're, you know, throwing some kind of some kind of your own identity, that you're
Yeah.
throwing your own identity aside, and this is why it's so difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think of too of uh it makes me think of a Bible verse too about like love your neighbor and also like love your enemy.
Yeah.
And like like that's really where
Oh,
like right, it's easy to like love and get along with somebody that like you get along with and you have the same
exactly.
passions and interests, but like how can you love somebody even when you disagree with them, and even when it's something that's like so close to who they are and so close to who you are? Like that's like
Yes.
I can't think of something harder to do. Like that's like how can, if someone, not saying this is the case, but if someone like does something to your family, to be able to have the faith to be
Right.
able to forgive them and also like love and accept them.
Absolutely.
And like I think that's like right, like easy for me to like sit here and say, but I think where that really gets tested is like when it happens, and like how do we react to that? And I mean
It's
that would make me
exactly.
that would make me really angry. I'd definitely lose my
Yeah.
cool.
But the thing is, the beautiful thing is, anger was there.
Yeah,
And and we're not saying, and this is what was beautiful about all these approaches. It's not that anger wasn't there, and it's not that ha, frustration wasn't there, and it's not that incomprehension wasn't there.
yeah,
But what was there, for me, it's the first step. It's acknowledgement.
yeah.
That's the first step. Acknowledging that you two exist,
Mm,
that you two are going through something, that you two have a narrative that is different from my own. That's
yeah.
the first step. Um, you know, we cannot expect from all of us suddenly to be lovey-dovey and understand and love each other,
Yeah.
and but this acknowledgement was the first step, which made interaction between the two of us possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's also really important too, because I feel like it shows like this is like not to have expectations and to say like this is how this is going to be. And
Yeah.
I've the comparison that I want to draw on is like in the US, like there's a lot going on with like identity stuff or identity politics or DE and I and all these different things, and it's almost like there is an expectation for something to be a certain way right out of the gate, and it almost doesn't leave any space for grace or forgiveness.
Right.
And I feel like where this is different and from what you're saying is like you're just saying it that like this is how it is, you know, and this is how it is, and also being uncomfortable and being there is just like the first step.
Hmm.
And I felt like I was also maybe going a little too off and drawing a comparison to like D&I and some other things as well. But I guess what I was trying to say with that is that they don't have that part. They don't have that part that's like understanding and giving people the grace and forgiveness, I would say.
When you say DNI, I'm sorry, but I'm not familiar with DNI.
Oh, DE&I, like diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh, okay.
Like
Okay.
there's like yeah, like for instance uh yeah, for instance, like there was this like this movie that just came out with this guy who goes like, I'm going really sidetracked here, but
It's okay.
he goes undercover as like a DE and I expert.
Okay.
He's like a white guy and he gets like certified, and like it's like kind of satire, but like he kind of shows like what the system of what these things are from the inside. And not to say that look like diversity, equity, inclusion are bad things, but like the system that has been built around it has been like very much so like corrupted
Yes.
by the people that are in it. And I think that's the comparison of like that I've been trying to make is like we're the system is only as good as our like quality of presence that we show up with it. And for instance, like tying it back to this and like conflict in conflict, talking about like this is only as effective as like we are able to show up and to be there and to understand one another.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just went on a huge tangent, but
No, I'm curious. And what movie was it, or is it? Oh,
Yeah,
you know.
it was with Matt Walsh. It was Am I Racist?
Oh,
Yeah.
gonna have to now.
There was a really funny scene too where so he's like he's affiliated too with like the Daily Wire, which I guess would be considered like conservative media. And then there's like this one scene though where he is like he's like sitting down with like this woman who like wrote this book. I'm gonna here, I'm trying to find it. She basically wrote this book about how like if you're white you're inherently racist. And he basically like gets this woman to agree with him and like gets this woman and him to like pay reparations, like actual cash out of their pockets to the producer who is like undercover, who's like this black guy. But
Okay,
anyway, it's I got super sidetracked, but it's really funny.
I'm gonna look it
And
up now. I'm curious, and I'm gonna look it up.
yeah, but but yeah, super
Mm,
sidetracked. But I think that the point I was trying to make too is that I don't think we can get carried away with like the what that we're doing, but like we need to like really be mindful and aware of like how we show up and do these things.
yeah,
And like what is our heart posture like going into this? Because like we can do great things for the wrong reason, or we can do things that seem noble but for the wrong reason.
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, I'm also I'm curious too as to like what has in like doing all this work, how have you seen this kind of like play into like other aspects of your life? Like do you feel like you show up differently as like uh you said you had children, so I would assume like a mother or as like a therapist,
Mhm.
or like do you feel like it fills into other aspects of your life?
Yes, yes, and I'm trying to make the link because it all goes back to Jung again, in my opinion. I mean, it's all about being able to hold the tension of the opposites or the polarities inside of you, right? And um, and it's exactly that. I mean, if my research showed that in the end it's about being able to hold the tension between opposing narratives,
Yeah.
in my personal life, I am trying to live um, my life. I am trying to apply Jung's view in my personal life, and one of his one of his you know um, biggest theories, if you will, is to be able to hold these tensions
Yeah.
inside of yourself. And when you're able, only when you're able to hold these tensions without collapsing in one polarity or in another
Hmm.
polarity, then sort of a transmutation can, sort of a transformation of transmutations can occur, right?
Wow.
And this is something that I do apply in my life and that I do apply in my try to transmit to my children or try to transmit to my patients, for example. It is, you don't have to choose one side or another. We live so much in a binary world.
Yeah.
It's all about black and white nowadays. Um, um, you don't have to be there. You can, you can be gray, and you can feel black and white at the same time, without for it to be weird. We are
Yeah.
just human beings, and as human beings, there is nothing more normal. This is something that I'm saying that today, but I had to learn it for myself. There's nothing more normal than to live or to um, to have contradictory feelings, behaviors,
Yeah.
visions, etc. And we need to accept that and to acknowledge that it's okay to
Yeah.
have to live with polarities.
Mm.
Um, um, and it really struck or still strikes me today how much people find it difficult to live with polarities and have this inherent sort of obligation feeling that
Yeah.
I have to choose between
Mm.
that one or that one. I cannot feel both of them together. It's,
Mm.
if I feel both of them together, then I'm not coherent and I have to be coherent.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm trying to transmit is it's okay if you're not. There's nothing more human than to feel both things that are completely opposite of one another.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why? I guess I have two questions. One would be like, why do you think that is?
That people fight that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I cannot pinpoint, but I think it might go towards our first talk about, I don't know if that makes sense, but about science, because science means it has to be coherent, it has to be linear,
Yeah.
it has to be comprehensive, it has to be logical.
Yeah.
And I am more of a, you know, let's not be linear. Let's be circular.
Yeah.
Um, um, it doesn't have to be logic.
Yeah.
It you know, you don't have to oblige yourself to choose between two things when these two things are two feelings that you have at the same time. I mean,
Yeah.
so I do not know why we do that per
Yeah.
se, but I have seen that it's like a collective pattern that
Huh.
we do have. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So then what could we do to be more accepting of those polarities?
I think it's all about consciousness and awareness and being able to talk about it and acknowledge it and
Yeah.
not fall into one category or the other. I mean, of course, in the end, it's important to make choices. But
Yeah.
when you make choices, in my opinion, it's always important, even if you made a choice A instead of a choice B, to be able to say, well, I hesitated. And choice B was also, it was also there and it was also difficult. And it's still something that's really present for me. But in the end, you made a choice, but you don't have to completely shove the other choice into your unconsciousness. You can be
Yeah.
conscious about it being there also, as as an acceptable conscious choice that was out there. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what from you saying that too, what sticks out excuse me, what sticks out to me too is like the theme of like acceptance.
Mm.
And it seems like you mentioned like holding on to polarities, but at the same time it seems like a paradox in the way where it's like yes, holding on, but it also means like surrendering as well.
Yes.
So it's like it makes me think of like a Chinese finger trap where you stick your finger in. But yeah,
But you're right. You're right. And it doesn't eliminate the other, just like you just said now. I mean, um, I can be aware of my choice.
yeah,
I can be aware of the difficulty of choosing. But in the end, I'm going to have to choose and let go of, it's like a very cliche sentence who says that every choice comes with a sacrifice.
Yeah.
You're always sacrificing something when you're choosing something.
Yeah.
Just be aware of it,
Yeah.
you know? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's still the question that still it comes down to is like, how can you really operationalize that into daily life to be able to like practice that?
Personally, I have integrated that through, um, you know, Jung's approach, for example, and by talking with like-minded people and etc. So I think it's about being trying to be more aware and more conscious of these things and to talk about it and not to be and not to shove it away. But yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's a good question. How do you operate that on an everyday in your everyday life? It is difficult. It is
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's almost like the question is like, how can you practice surrendering? How can you practice surrendering and also holding on to things without judging them?
Yeah, and it also reminds me of people that are never able to choose because making a choice
Yeah.
means that you have to surrender or to let go of something else, and so they stay in this zone
Yeah.
of being frozen in
Mm,
some way, you know.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
All right. Well, we can end it there. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciated this conversation. And I think the work that you're doing is really important and needed. And also just really cool to just hear uh, your own personal experience with it. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.